Welcome to Lancefield on the Line. My name is David Lancefield, and I'm absolutely delighted and privileged to welcome Roger Martin. Roger is an advisor to CEOs, the author of 12 books, the latest being When More is Not Better, Overcoming America's Obsession with Economic Efficiency, and an emeritus professor at the Rotman School of Management at the University of Toronto, where you served as dean from 1998 to 2013. You've rightly earned a huge amount of recognition for all of your work and endeavors, including a Thinkers 50 award being #1 in the world in 2017. Most recently, you've been publishing a great portfolio of articles on Medium on the practice of strategy. And if I got it right, I read all of them. I counted 34 at the time of this recording. And that's the focus of today. You are a resident of South Florida. You are a fan, I understand, of American football. And you are really, really welcome, Roger. Thank you for joining.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to this.
Great,
and
fantastic.
You're right. It's 34, and I'm working on number 35, which will be out on Monday. So
fantastic, fantastic, and every week, we'd say that's yes. A fair commitment.
Yeah,
that's where I want to start. I mean, what I admire about your work and your writing is you take the practice of strategy and you focus down on either the myths, the areas, the conventional wisdom that you don't agree with, or the aspects that are, you think, most important to get right wherever you're practicing it. So a simple question to start off with, he says with a wry smile, which is, if you had to focus on one area, you'd say, and you were advising perhaps a new strategy practitioner to really get right, which out of all the areas you've looked at would you focus on?
Man, this is hard because there are really two, but I will say the thing that I would tell that young strategy practitioner is that great analysis does not produce great strategy. So do not think of strategy as an analytical exercise. You can analyze the company and analyze customers and analyze competitors and do that quantitatively, and out of that will sort of emerge or pop a strategy. What you will be likely to do is produce a strategy that is the status quo or something very close to the status quo, and somebody else who thinks of strategy as involving a lot of kind of imagination. Imagine what might be, and then figuring out how to produce what might be, even though you cannot prove in advance with analysis that it's a good idea. They will beat you. They will outflank you. And so I guess that would be number one.
So hence your emphasis on possibilities, if you like, within your own framework. So what's number two then? You mentioned two. Go on, give us a taste of.
Well, the other one would be to think of strategy as a plan. The output of a strategy is a plan, a long document, typically that says a lot of things, and it really should be focused on choices. You should understand what is happening now in your company is a product or organization, even a nonprofit, whatever it is. What's happening in your organization today is the product of a whole series of choices that you've made in the past, including right now, and that produces a set of outcomes. And any gap between that set of outcomes and what you wish they were, right, is a result of a set of choices that you've made and acted on. And so you should think about strategy as a tool for making a set of choices that are different than the current choices that are aimed at closing whatever gap you experience. So I would say to that young strategist, think about choices. Think about changing the choices that the company is making. I don't care about any planning document, any of that stuff. I just want the few key choices that are going to be different tomorrow than they are today.
That's very powerful. You've just challenged, and if not disrupted, a large amount of the consulting world and the corporate world, which does the opposite of what you just said. It's
And it's kind
interesting
of, it's kind of, it's sort of interesting. You have to go back in history. It's said that, and Tom Wolfe wrote about this in The Right Stuff, that an entire generation of pilots, all in the cockpit and communications, have this laconic kind of Texas drawl. Even though that's not where they're from, and it's because Chuck Yeager, the alpha male test pilot who was the star of his The Right Stuff book and movie, he influenced everybody. They wanted to be like him.
Yes.
And I think the father of strategy consulting is Bruce Henderson. So he created the industry, BCG, Boston Consulting Group, in 1963, and he was a real kind of analytical person. And BCG hired, first and foremost, Baker Scholars, top 5% of the class at Harvard Business School, all of whom were analytical wonks. And so the industry has grown up with the notion that that's what a strategy consultant should be. Yes. Somebody who's got like uber analytical skills, could crunch any kind of numbers in the most brilliant way, because that's what Bruce Henderson would have done.
Yes. And even taking that practice, even now, even if you were to agree with its relevance, which you clearly challenged, and I think rightly challenged, there are more and more algorithms that would do much of that work better, faster, more efficiently than before. And even in the strategy process, let alone if you like the strategy work, I often see too many mini me's in the process. So if you're thinking about possibilities, or indeed, if you like, down the funnel, the capabilities and the management systems that you articulate, you sort of need people who understand all of that involved. Yet I don't know how you see it, but I often see those sort of involved very late in the process, if at all. And then something is sort of given to them like a present to say, it's beautifully crafted. Here it is. Please go and implement it or execute it.
Yes. No, you're absolutely right, and it's one of the greatest fallacies in business, right? I ask the question, right? If strategy is about making choices, so strategy formulation is making choices, and then we go on to this follow-up stage, which is called execution or implementation, depending on your inclination. And that is different than strategy. And the absolutely fundamentally important and central thing about strategy is making choices. Then what must execution be in order to warrant a separate name, right? Because if it warrants a separate name, it must have it must have features that are different from the features of strategy. So it must be choiceless doing. You've just handed off the strategy, and then these people just, I guess, without making any choices, kind of do things. And then if you sort of ask the question, like, what do those people actually do? The answer is, they make a whole bunch of choices. But if they're told, well, our strategy is to differentiate on the basis of, kind of customer service that makes the customer feel like we will always stick with them and be with them. And that's a choice that is different from what our choice has been now. Otherwise, it wouldn't be strategy. Then so those customer service people, like little robots, go and do that without thinking. No, they have to say, well, gee, what would that mean for customers? What would that mean about the process of how we resource customer service? Do we have a dedicated person or a team with a point person, or right? There's a million super important where to play, how to win, to using my nomenclature, choices that those people have to make. So I think it is one of the great fallacies of strategy, and it's very clever of strategists because it lets them off the hook. So if those people who are, quote, executing, essentially ignore the stupidity of this terminology and say, I got to make really important and tricky strategy choices at my level that are just like the strategy choices I've been handed, and so I'll do that and just ignore those morons, and then it all works out spectacularly.
Yeah.
What will the diagnosis be? Awesome strategy, right? And if instead they do what they're supposed to do by the nomenclature and the framing, which is act like automatons, make no choices,
Yes.
then and it'll be, of course, a disaster, right? What will the diagnosis be?
So
Great strategy, but terrible execution.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they know they're screwed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If they go far beyond the job that they're given and credited for, right? The answer will be the people above were brilliant, and they are non-entities. And if they do what the morons kind of think they should be doing, they will be blamed. So that is the state of strategy and execution out in the world. And this is one of the things that's most entrenched. I mean, it's one of these things where I believe that I will go to my grave without having made a big dent in this ridiculous framing. Because whenever I talk to people about it, so they say, so there's like strategy formulation and their strategic execution, right? They want to maintain the silly fallacy because they're just so wedded to it.
And it's linked. I mean, it's linked to this sort of debate around the if you like, the link between strategy and culture, if you like, as a broader concept, where whether it's attributed to Peter Drucker or not, the sort of which comes first. And apart from the loose language around it, I see a lot of organizations do a lot of great work on their organizational culture. And so they score highly on any form of metric, sentiment, and so forth. And then you ask the sort of questions you've just been framing around where are they going? Are they actually going to win, etc.? And it's in there somewhere. But effectively, they are just spinning the plates, as I call it, spinning the plates on the existing business. And so I'm curious, perhaps as just a sort of follow-up to what you were saying, how if you've got leaders at the moment, you think about leaders at the moment, they are facing at least two challenges out of many. One is there is the shift to hybrid working, more hybrid working, and the if you like the trauma, the sensitivity, and everything else, the exhaustion that comes from the pandemic. Broadly speaking, that's a cultural question. And then there are major strategic questions about where to play, if not more, given everything from a change in customer behavior, companies going out of business, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got two big, got a cultural question, you've got a strategy question. My observation is that they are treated quite separately.
Yeah.
Or separately, and there's a bias to one, which is, hey, we're a strong business, let's lead on our culture, because that's what we're really good at. Or actually, let's lead on the strategy, and in the way you just described, people will follow once we've set our, set the statement very clearly, told everybody, put the metrics in place. If they do, everybody will just follow. How do you see that picture as a follow-up?
No, it's an interesting question, and if we go back to Drucker for a minute, so Peter was a lovely man and mentor to me, and I've done a whole bunch of things with the Drucker Center over time, and so I know that the Drucker archivists, and there are a bunch of Drucker archivists that go through everything that Drucker ever has, and there's a Drucker house, a Drucker sort of museum. They have searched long and hard, high and low, for any evidence of two things attributed to Peter Drucker. The two most famous things attributed to Peter Drucker, most famous sayings are managers do things right and leaders do the right thing.
Yes.
And then culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yes.
There is no evidence whatsoever that he ever mouthed those words, like in a speech,
right?
Or wrote them. For sure, he's never.
I knew there was uncertainty about it, but I didn't know that. Wow, that's fascinating.
No, they've come to the conclusion that that's people making it up because it sounds like something Peter Drucker
Nice.
would say. But in any event, back to I mean, culture is tricky, and I'm actually writing an HBR article on that very topic. I mean, people try to change culture in ways that simply don't work, right? So the number 1 and 2 in some order methods for changing culture in an organization are: 1, to declare a culture change. New CEO comes in and says, we're going to have a culture change. This is going to be the culture now. Or 2nd is to do formal organizational changes. We're going to flatten the organization to have a culture of sort of accountability, or a culture of speed, or whatever. There is no evidence whatsoever that either of those work ever. Right? Like, it might be nice if they did work, because they're kind of handy and relatively simple. The only thing that ever changes culture is having people in face-to-face working together, changing the way they work with one another.
Yes.
And so that's, if you want to change a culture, that's the only way you can change it.
Hence why it takes such a long time. When people say to you, oh, I mean, this is the challenge with tenure models and so on, which is, so people say, oh, it might take a year or two. It's like, really? I mean, come on. If you're going to be sleeves rolled up physically, virtually, and changing the way people think, feel, behave, act in different situations, it takes time, right? You have to change your muscles.
But it's doable. And I'll use an example of taking over as dean of the Rotman School. So I took over as dean of the Rotman School in the wake of a kind of a silly scandal that cost the previous dean his job and created deep fissures in the school, so that there were gigantic arguments and warring camps and the like. And I was warned of this. I said, it's going to be a cesspool and kind of and so I said, well, I'm going to have to change culture. But having me, an outsider, non-academic, coming in and sort of telling people, we're going to change culture, I knew that would, that and whatever, $4.99 would buy me a decaf latte. And so I did a couple of things in terms of my personal interactions with other people when I worked with them, that I would argue had a profound impact on culture change. So the first one was, I've recognized very quickly that people, because there were warring factions on and lots of recriminations going on, that people would come to me to tell me about terrible atrocities. Basically, right. That person was a terrible person, did this terrible thing and whatever. And so I simply started the practice of listening really carefully. Oh, very, 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 very interesting. Yep. So let's go right now to that person and sit down and we can work this out. And I'd be all cheery about it. It's sort of like, oh, yeah, we can go and work this out. And then I'd call Catherine, my assistant, in. I did it sort of for sure. Catherine, could you check to see if Will is in his office or John is in his office now, because Sally and I would like to come and see him. And then the person's like, no, don't go, no. because they didn't want to actually have the other side present their case. No. They wanted to come to the dean and be able to create a black and white case. Notice me, I'm wearing the white hat. That other person always dresses completely in black and kills puppies, so you should feel very badly about that person. And so what it was designed to do is to say, well, the dean isn't going to talk about somebody behind their back.
Yes.
And the dean believes that if you actually talk amongst each other, mediated maybe by me as a dean, I'll help out. But what happened is that people just stopped doing it. Like literally.
Really?
Like probably for the last 13 years of, it took a little while of my time as a 15-year time as dean, I didn't get anybody coming to my office
Word
complaining
spread
about
quickly.
the third party, right? Because it wasn't fulfilling for them anymore. I made
Yes.
it unfulfilling and helped them recognize the kind of the silliness. So I did that. I did another thing, which was literally the formal system for reviewing professors. Was the professors every year in the spring would write a report on what they had done. It had a format of, here's what I did in teaching, here's what I did in research, here's what I did in service, their annual activity report. And my job as dean, in conjunction with the vice dean academic, was to write them a letter that was actually a boilerplate letter with one paragraph that gave them a rating. Right. Here's your rating on teaching, here's your rating on research, here's your rating on service, and here's your overall rating. Right? And so that's the formal process. And I made this change, which was just to say, you know what, this seems crazy. If professors are our most important asset, maybe how's about this for an idea? I'll meet with them for an hour at that time after I get their review, and I will just ask them, kind of 3 questions. To what extent did you accomplish what you set out to accomplish? What would you like to accomplish going forward in the next year? And what can the school do that it's not doing now to help you accomplish those?
Yeah, that's very positive and clear framing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And then the next year, right? That was sort of the first year, but the next year, then we could discuss what we discussed, right? I didn't have to sort of say, right, yeah. Because I'd then be familiar. And it was transformational, right?
Yeah.
It was transformational.
Much more real and human as well, isn't it? Much more real, clear, human.
Yes, but one-on-one. See, that's how culture changes.
Yes.
The culture changes in the crucible of one-on-one conversations of that sort. And so they found, again, they could talk to me about their research. They could talk to me about their disappointments. They could talk to me about their hopes. And I could do little things. I mean, you know enough about the academic world to know there are tenured people, tenure stream people, and then we have lecturers who are in the quasi-Indian caste system, right, of modern academic, our lower caste, and we had 3 campuses, a downtown one, and an east one, and a west one, suburban. And this was way back, this 20 plus years ago. And this wonderful lecturer named Joan, accounting lecturer, I asked her what could the school do that it's not doing now, and she said, "Oh, that's easy." I'm thinking, "What?" I'd love to have a laptop. And I said, "Well, why?" And she said, "Well, the way it works now is when I go out to these suburban campuses, Mississauga, I go to Mississauga. I've got to download my lectures onto floppy disks, and then take them and insert them into the computer in the lecture hall. It's always a pain. The students are sitting there waiting while I'm doing it. If I've gotten there a little bit late and whatever, it would be so awesome if I could have a laptop where I don't have to do any of that download. Everything's on it. I just plug it in and I go." And I said, "Yeah, that makes sense." But she said, "But the rule is at the school, you get one desktop computer in whatever office is your main office. If you somewhere there, she happened to be downtown. That was her main office." And I said, "Okay, we'll get you a laptop." And she was like, "How can this be? The rules, the formal system says no laptop."
Yes.
And I said, no. And at first was, you're not serious, because she had asked this many times before. And I said, "No, you can't have a laptop." And then I get a call from the IT people saying, "Did you tell Joan she could have a laptop?" And I said, "Yep." And they said, "Well, does this now policy change that everybody can have a laptop?" And I said, "No. Nobody else has asked me for one." And
so it's very specific, and you're helping somebody in a specific moment, and it makes a massive, and you're invested in them.
But that story then got around, right? And people sort of realized that the culture was one of, you had to take responsibility.
Yes.
You were going to tell me what you were going to try and accomplish. I was going to offer the schools help, and you better being able to do that. So you had to take responsibility. You had to take responsibility for asking, and I did anything within my power to facilitate you achieving those goals. And we just had a very different culture between the dean's office and the faculty, rather than a boss kind of keeping them controlled and in line.
Yeah.
I was kind of a helper. And the most hilarious thing that happened is I got calls, this is the weirdness, from professors from other faculties asking if they could have this kind of meeting with me. I was like, no, I've got enough. But it was a real application of time, because when I started there were 36 of them.
Right.
In my last year, there were about 160. So 160 1-hour meetings that I have to actually prepare for.
Huge. It's a big effort.
It's a big effort, but it was integral. We had a phenomenally changed strategy, enhanced strategy for the school, and
the learning of the multiplier effect, and the learning is huge from that. I mean, that's fantastic. It was a great story, and I know a bit about business schools, and I know I know the dynamics of some faculty. Some business schools have struggled, while we're on the topic, during the pandemic. In a nutshell, how resilient, if you look at the population, and I know there's different types and different league tables and so on, but in general, in terms of a typical business school, a good business school, how resilient do you think that model is going forward?
Not at all. And I was asked to give a speech at the greatest nerd fest on the planet, the Academy of Management, 10,000 business school professors getting together every year. So I got asked in 2013, my last year, to give a lecture on the future of the MBA. And so that's 2013. And I said, within 20 years, there will be 10% of the full-time tenure stream professors in MBA programs as there are today. So I said, in the Marines, they say at boot camp, look to your left, look to your right. Yep. Only one of the three of you is going to be around. I said, look to the left and look to the right. And 20 years from now, I'm sorry, let's look 5 to the left, 5 to the right. Only one of you is going to be around. So I still predict absolute devastation for the sector. So it is as resilient as brontosauruses. And it's happening already. MBA programs are closing, absolutely, left, right, and center, and we haven't.
Students are voting with their feet. They're more sophisticated in how they learn, how they want to learn, their price points. They're careful on their price points. I mean, you talked about the Academy of Management,
and there was a scale dynamic, right? That enabled small scale to be okay, right? You needed real people in real classrooms, so physical plant and all of that, right? If I just look at the U.S. market, 150,000 MBAs given out a year. Harvard Business School, until recently, and for 100 years, was the biggest. People don't realize that Harvard Business School was the biggest at 900 a year. So they produced 900 of those. So 0.6 of 1% market share. And that's the biggest. So everybody else goes down from there. So totally fragmented industry. And you ask, why is it so fragmented? Well, if Harvard Business School wanted to double, what would that take? And I think the answer is $10 billion at least, right? You'd have to buy another chunk of Boston, right? And build another 50 buildings, right? And you already got the biggest faculty in the world, tenure stream faculty. You'd have to double that without losing quality. It would take 10 years and $10 billion probably. So it stayed fragmented. And so nobody could have huge scale advantages in the business. HBS did have scale advantages over the schools that had 100 or 200 per graduating class, but with online,
completely.
Scale dynamics go out the window. A University of Phoenix can have 5,000, 10,000 a year, and what I predicted in 2013 is online, pure online will get at least 40%
Yes.
of that. And if it gets 40% of the 155,000, given that there are all these 100 person graduating class schools, that'll mean of the 1,000 or so MBA programs in North America, 400 are going to be just gone.
Wow. Yeah, that's huge. That's huge.
So it's going to be, that sector is going to be devastated.
Yeah. Wow, that's huge. On a more optimistic note, I mean, you work with a lot of CEOs, some notable CEOs, both now and in the past. Apart from your own brilliance, if you had to take somebody else along with you,
yes,
to complement your own skills, perhaps strengthen your own development points, I'm sure we all have them. What type of person would you bring along? Who would you most like to have with you?
Probably an industrial psychologist. One of my best proteges at Monitor Company left Monitor Company to go. Her name is Reshmi Paul, very bright woman. You should interview her. Went off to get an industrial psychology degree, and then went to work for a company called RHR International, which was the first company to bring industrial psychology to advice, and they sort of do kind of real coaching. There's a lot of not so real coaching out there, but kind of real coaching. She's now with a different smaller firm, but lots of CEOs kind of need kind of personal development of a sort that kind of person can provide. Now, she's unique because she was a great practicing strategist and combined those two things. But whenever I talk to her, she pays attention to things that I may sort of understand, but don't have the same learned perspective as she has. So I think it would be that. There are times when I would say bringing along an ethnographer would be great to help the CEO in question sort of understand that you can be qualitatively rigorous, that rigor doesn't mean being quantitative. So I guess top of mind, it would be those two kinds of people.
Fantastic. I mean, talking about the more personal aspects, one of your latest posts, I think the latest post at the time of this recording, is on the personal aspects of strategy, or applying your framework.
People have liked that. People have liked that one.
I loved it. And it's a topic close to my heart as somebody who tries to combine what you just described. So speaking personally then, how have you applied your own framework to yourself in terms of finding out where to play, at different stages of your career? I'm always curious how people practice what they preach, and some people do, and some people don't, or can't, or won't. So how have you done it?
Well, I guess I've always known that I'm good at analyzing, understanding complex systems. I mean, I think my mother, who we were talking earlier, you come from an educational background. My mother was an elementary school teacher, and I think she sort of kind of taught me to think and taught me to figure out things for myself, even if it was a complex, complicated system. So I think my own strategy was always to say, I'll have an aspiration of figuring stuff out that other people struggle with, where there is a method to the madness. Why, I've always said one of the times I want to write a book called Why Things Are the Way They Are and Not Some Other Way. I say you're only going to change something if you understand why they work the way they do and not some other way. It's not random that they're working the way. There's a reason why that is exactly how they work. So I've always, I think, had an aspiration to help people figure out when things are confusing and not working the way they want to work.
Yes.
here's a different lens you can take on it. Here's a different way of doing it. So that has always been my kind of how to win. And I've tried to deploy myself in situations where I can use that to my advantage. So strategy consulting made sense to me as a kind of an enterprise. And as time went on, sort of writing made a lot of sense. The dean thing was interesting. I approached that job. I mean, I did it for public service reasons. I felt Canada did one great business school, and I would leave my job and go back and make sure Canada had one great business school, which it for sure does, and the other business schools had to respond by upgrading. So it's, I think, helped Canada broadly. I'd like to believe, but even there, I said I'm going to reconceptualize how you think about being a dean.
Yes.
So this is how the dean job is conceived of in deandom. Could I conceptualize it in a different way and have a positive, a bigger positive effect from doing that? So for example, when I arrived, I had this wonderful woman, Catherine Davis, who'd been the dean's secretary for the past 15 years. She had immense knowledge. So I got her to help me do an analysis of what the previous deans had spent their time on.
Oh, fascinating.
And I got the list, what for the 250 kind of working days, what did the deans spend their time on? And I made it my task, my goal, to take 100 of those days and not do them.
Right.
So that I could do something else higher value.
Yes.
So the previous deans on average spent 50 days a year, a day every week, on things financial, budgeting, planning, kind of all of that stuff. If you just added it up, is 50 days. And I went to my CAO, which is Chief Administrative Officer, which is the academic equivalent of a CFO, a wonderful woman who I felt was underutilized, and said, Mary Ellen, Yeoman's social name, Mary Ellen, right now the dean spends 50 days a year on things financial. I want that to be 5. And her first reaction was to be kind of both sort of horrified and a little insulted. Like, you don't think it's kind of worth your time.
Not important enough for you. Yeah.
I said, no. I think that you're better at it than me in many respects. What I'd like to do is have us change completely the way we do the finances, a completely different relationship with the university, whatever. And I'd like to work with you on that. And I'm going to invest like crazy. I'll probably be doing at a rate higher than 50 days a year for the first 6 months, maybe even a year. But the purpose is then to make you the czarina of finance. And I think she didn't believe me. And I think actually after 6 months, she thought that I was an absolute micromanager because I was having all these meetings with her. No, we have to think about it this way, think about it that way. But then I disappeared. And for the last 13 years, at least, maybe 13 and a half years, I spent 5 days a year total on financial stuff. And so when everybody said to me, wow, you must never sleep. You do all these things that other deans don't do.
Right. You mean more conscious in you made some choices. You made some choices. But also, to your point about culture earlier, you'd invested yourself early in shaping and working with people one-to-one and so on in doing it.
It's not a free lunch. That's right. You have to make these investments, but to get something back. And arguably I got back like 600 or 700 days, right? Where I could do stuff that previous deans couldn't. So I taught on average 2 to 3 courses. Deans taught 0, right? I once taught 7 courses in a year. No dean that I'm aware of, business school dean that I'm aware of, wrote a book while they were a business school dean. I wrote 2009 while I was a
There you
business
go.
school.
And that changes your relationship also with faculty and others in terms of how they perceive you. Roger, we made a choice to make time together today, and I want to be sensitive to your time and be respectful of it. I'd love to go on, but let's not do that because I want to talk to you in the future. It's been wonderful, enriching. We've covered a lot of different, topics and ground. There's more to come. I'd encourage viewers and listeners to read all of your Medium articles, and there's more to come on HBR and other things you write. You have a great website at rogerlmartin.com, which has all of your resources. Roger, I'm very grateful for your time, candor, and spirit in this conversation. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I love these more conversational things than some sort of rote set of questions. So you do a lovely job, David. I would be delighted to come back and talk sometime in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you. That was another edition of Lancefield on the Line.